So yesterday I went to see the new Spider-Man Brand New Day film, and I must say I loved it. This is going to be a review of everything about the film, what I liked, what I don't like about the film. So yeah, if you don't want any spoilers, I'd recommend you don't even bother watching the video. But if you have watched it, stick around, let me know what your thoughts are of the film in your end, and hopefully we can all come to an agreement on what we think of the film itself. Stay till the end and I'll tell you what I think the biggest theory is about the film. We went 5 years of waiting for a new Spider-Man film to come out, and honestly it was going to be something very hard to pull off, because considering how well No Way Home did, you'd really need to pick it up and see how could they do a film that could even possibly be bigger. Honestly, they did a phenomenal job with the film. We are catching up with Peter Parker being alone. He's got an apartment, and basically we all know that he's becoming more of a spider, because the spider DNA is coming into play, and he's growing organic webs, as we all come to know. As he's trying to suppress this, he's trying to actually do what Bruce Banner does. So, as we see in the trailers, Bruce Banner has a gadget that allows him to stay in control of Hulk. And right, so this is important because Peter Parker basically does this same thing, only it's for the webs. The spider DNA is actually starting to become more and more in control. So he's starting to feel a lot more hyper sense of his senses. So we get that as a few moments in the film of his senses going all over the place. And so this tells us that he is getting a little bit more out of control. And also this also causes his eyes to go black, which causes him to get more aggressive and essentially beat the living shit out of Scorpion. I have a bunch of notes on my phone here that I'm going to get into right now. The first thing we have is Sadie Sinks' character is Jean Grey. No one knows who the hooded figure is. Everyone's wondering who could the hooded figure be. For me, I think it would have been a way better reveal that Sadie Sink is the hooded figure if she had never been part of the marketing. The second Sadie Sink came onto the Spider-Man Instagram account, it kind of spoils the whole mystery of it. It doesn't take a bunch of brain cells to kind of put two and two together to be like, she's the hooded figure, isn't she? Now, I will also say other characters. Yelena, when we meet her, when Spider-Man goes to meet her at her pool office, having Yelena there, although it was cool that we see Yelena there, I genuinely think she was pointless. I'm just saying. I genuinely think having her character there was pointless, because all she does is do a little bit of investigating into the damage control facility to see what's going on with them. And that's it. Also in this scene, I absolutely love the nod that they did when Peter is shirtless but he has a mask on, he's in his jocks. And for any of you guys who are huge Spider-Man fans and have played the games as well, if you 100% in the very first Spider-Man game, you would unlock Peter pretty much naked but just in his jocks and his mask. And I loved that nod to the game. But again, Yelena, I didn't really see the point in her. And another thing with other characters, right? Scorpion. I really liked him, but I think he was a little bit underused. I think because they were trying to focus on Jean Grey's villain arc into kind of being a good person near the end of the film. The other thing to point out is that in the trailers, when we get a lot of those iconic shots of Spider-Man fighting all these other villains, half of the very first trailer is already used within the first 5 minutes of the film. We have a whole other story to go through, because firstly we have Peter Parker being alone for the very first half of just seeing these villains, and now the whole second half of the film was mainly focusing on Jean Grey's backstory. This is the fourth Spider-Man film with Tom Holland in it, yet we're getting a new villain, right? Which means we need backstory as to who this villain is, which I do really like about the film, is that they try and pull us into the backstory of Jean Grey's character and how she, the relationship with her sister, and we see motive as to why Jean Grey, tried to find her sister. It's because damage control kidnapped her sister. Although, again, I'm not hugely sure why. We start to like Jean Grey after a while because she starts to feel like one of us. We start to relate to her a little bit more. Peter Parker has these struggles that he lost his aunt. Jean Grey lost her sister because it turns out that she was killed, because the last time her sister was anywhere to be seen was this damage control facility. because VMAX was the last thing that her sister had seen. I'm going to say it's a long shot, but I think VMAX is a nod to Sadie Sinks' character as Max in Stranger Things, whereas the V obviously meaning Vecna. I don't know if that's too much of a stretch. I don't think I'm the only one who has that slight of thought. I don't know. That's just my thought and theory on this. You need to really make sure that like you can pull people into a new villain. We need to see what we can do. It's Sadie Sink, very good. I will say, even though it was like Sadie Sink was like, you know, some people had the predictions, she did a phenomenal job. One thing a lot of people might have been wondering is there anyone in the universe that would still remember that Peter Parker is Spider-Man? And I think that it would have been Savage Hulk. What are the odds that Savage Hulk knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man? Which is why we get a moment in the film where Hulk is on the verge of potentially killing Spider-Man, if we could say, but then he sees himself in the mirror and then Spider-Man has his mask off and pretty much we see Hulk get light on the face. He goes from angry to that realization of, I know you. Although Ned and MJ know that something in their life is missing. Because again, all it is that their memory of Peter Parker was erased, but not Spider-Man. We get a nice little reunion near the end when Peter becomes Spider-Man and himself fights the Hand in a gorgeous fight sequence, which is one of the best fight sequences I've ever seen in Spider-Man. I really, really loved the story that they portrayed of Peter Parker being alone. That's one thing I love, is that he's very vulnerable now. Even though he's on his own, he's got no family left. The whole second half is kind of leaning into Jean Grey's character. We need to know about her backstory and all that. This kind of follows into like a certain scene in the film that I personally loved. As a filmmaker, you know, having finished college, I immediately had the thought as to how they kind of were trying to put it. Near the end, when Spider-Man confronts Jean, she goes into Peter's mind, right? And we see Aunt May talking to Peter. What I absolutely love about this scene is how it's orchestrated and edited. It is phenomenal filmmaking, phenomenal edit, where it goes from Aunt May talking to Peter about his powers, what it means to be a hero, but also to just remember who he is and that he's doing good. And then it cuts to May talking to Jean. So now it's like May's giving Jean advice. And then Peter comes into frame and now he's replacing Aunt May. So the roles have switched now. Aunt May was giving advice to Peter. Now Peter's giving that same advice to Jean. That was one of the moments of the film that actually kind of had me kind of tearing up a little bit, because like the editing, the filmmaking, and just the overall connection that it was giving about the characters, I absolutely loved. I will say that I think this was perfect timing for when we see the moments that Frank Castle tries to shoot Jean, but then because Peter has a good heart, steps in the way. Because afterwards, you know, Jean Grey and Peter both understand each other. They feel like the same person. They relate to each other. It only means so much that Spider-Man took a bullet. And so obviously my heart was racing at like 100 miles an hour when Peter gets shot. It's just beautiful because it's such a vulnerable moment for both of these characters that you are at ease. And then Peter steps in the way. But thank fuck he didn't die. Because he had to be back in Doomsday. But I loved that scene. It was probably one of my favourite scenes of the film, was that simple little bedroom scene where they were switching in Aunt May, Jean, Peter comes in, replaces Aunt May and becomes Aunt May basically. I loved that nod. A few other things, simple, the filmmaking, the cinematography, the editing, the soundtrack, the colour grading. Oh my god. Like, as a film student, I could not have been more proud to have watched the film and be like, this is what I'm looking for. We know how Spider-Man has started off from Homecoming all the way up until No Way Home. He has MJ and Ned, he has Aunt May, he has Happy, he had Tony, and after they made everyone vanish after No Way Home and made everyone forget, it's now just Peter. This is the most vulnerable time we ever see Spider-Man, but also it's how we all feel so close and related to him as a character. Because that's what we're looking for in Spider-Man. To see how he tackles life on his own was so powerful. and it's honestly one of the best pieces of filmmaking I've seen in an MCU film, and how they portrayed that story of Spider-Man being alone. And again, he is interacting with other characters, but they don't know who he is. Yes, you shed a tear when you see him in the party after he follows Ned, where he finally has his first interaction with Ned and MJ, and it turns out that Ned is trying to figure out who Spider-Man is, because he's had this whole thing of like, he feels like he remembers always being with Spider-Man. This leads to my favourite pieces that I've been waiting to say. I absolutely loved how they also tried to portray Ned and MJ's memory loss of Peter. Because when they meet him, they're always saying, I feel like I've always had these situations where I was with Spider-Man, but I feel like I'm missing something else. And so I love the nod we have near the end of the film when MJ is sat on that rooftop where Peter, Ned and her were all sat when they were talking about MIT. There's a missing part in her life which she's trying to put together. So when MJ kind of finds out who Spider-Man is, because he leaves the letter that he wrote to MJ at the end of No Way Home in Frank's place, this is our first moment of will MJ figure it out? I feel like this is where my biggest theory comes. They have a blank period in their life where they're like, I feel like there was someone else. Because MJ says it as well. She feels like she's waiting for someone. She says it in the party as Peter's looking at her. And so that only tells us even more. Could this be what happens? And so this leads into me thinking that MJ fully remembers Peter. Right? This is a huge 50-50 that I will explain here. In the end, when Peter approaches Ned at the end of the film and says his name is Peter. Now remember, after Spider-Man was hanging out with MJ and Ned in their apartment, MJ calls out Peter, and then Ned goes, okay, Spider-Man's name is Peter. This is one piece to remember. When Ned and Peter do that handshake, it's like, your brain is telling you that, I don't know you, but your body knows the movements. The last thing that Ned and Peter did together was that handshake. And so, my theory is that when Ned says Peter at the end, that is Ned fully remembering Peter as in his best friend. I don't think that it's him simply saying Peter for the sake of him knowing that MJ said Peter when he left the apartment. I think it's Ned getting that memory of oh my god, Peter. He remembers him as his best friend. And that is my biggest theory of the film. And also, I will just say, if you were looking to stay for the end credits and you didn't stay for the end credits, I'll just say, they were useless, by the way. That's my overall thought about Spider-Man. Now, again, if you have watched this whole video and haven't seen the film, I'm just saying, watch the film, see it for yourself, have your own opinions. This is all my debunking about the film. I loved everything about the film. Again, I just thought Yelena was a bit useless. Everything else about the film was unreal. When the Hand is trying to kill him, which again, I think is the best choreography I've ever seen for a fight scene in a Spider-Man film. I'm just telling you now, Destin Daniel Cretton did a phenomenal job at the entire film. So credit to him for making such a good film and for basically telling us a great story of what it is like for Spider-Man to finally be alone. And I feel like a lot of people would have thought some parts were boring. One thing I really loved was that the film had its moments to breathe. You know, it wasn't just action-packed after action-packed after action-packed after here, consequence. No. It took time to breathe, have some comedy moments, have some really heart-to-heart conversations, which I just loved. Frank Castle's character, unreal. Again, with Tom Holland, Zendaya and Jacob, the three of them, you can still sense that chemistry between the three of them when they're hanging out in the apartments. And there is one thing that I have hugely forgotten about. Venom. We never see Venom. It's Marvel, what are we doing? Genuinely, what are we doing? We've been teasing that Venom and Spider-Man would meet. They still haven't fucking met. But for now, I think that is everything about Spider-Man that I've wanted to cover. Again, if you have any of your own opinions about it, let me know what you think. And that is the end of my review for Spider-Man Brand New Day. Let me know your own opinions about the film if you have seen it. And yeah, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more videos, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.